Hello, I'm Ross Tayler, your host and guide for Sacred Sundays, a space to slow down, tune in, and return to what's sacred within and around you. I'm also a life coach for empaths and sensitive souls, walking alongside those who are ready to come home to who they actually are. These conversations are part of fulfilling that purpose, a collective exploration of what it means to live in connection with the sacred. Some weeks you'll hear a sound-based offering to open the space. Other times we'll simply begin in conversation. However it unfolds, this is an invitation into presence, connection, and the beauty of the unseen. If these conversations find you, please subscribe, rate, and share so others can find their way here. Pour a cup of tea, settle in, and let's begin. Today on Sacred Sundays, our guest is Kate Emberton. Kate is an intuitive channel, energy healer, astrologer, and transformational guide, devoted to helping others awaken the truth of who they are. Through a unique fusion of channeled wisdom, astrology, energy healing, spiritual mentorship, and intuitive coaching, she supports deep healing, expanded consciousness, and lasting transformation. Her work bridges the seen and unseen realms, helping people access higher guidance, embody their soul's wisdom, and stepping into greater alignment with their highest potential. Kate is the founder of Mystic Mountain Healing. Welcome, Kate. So glad to have you on the podcast. I think we met a few weeks ago now at the Parksville Metaphysical Fair, and we had a great conversation, and it was great to meet you and your partner. And one of the things that came from that conversation was an invitation to be on the podcast. So here we are. So good to make this connection.
Yes, thank you for having me, Russ. It's an honor to be here.
Awesome. So you are working in a lot of different ways, and what is the way that you enjoy working the most? If you think of all those modalities that I mentioned in your bio.
I think I enjoy the coaching aspect of what I do. It's something that I weave into whether I'm doing healing work or intuitive work. I'm a spiritual teacher, so I really enjoy bringing those concepts through and helping educate people and bringing things into people's awareness that they may not be aware of.
Okay. And you mentioned spiritual teacher. So what are the things that you enjoy teaching? What are the things that show up in that realm? I imagine that there's kind of a broad spectrum of what you bring to these coaching sessions.
Right. I'm going to say the focus of my coaching session is more in the spiritual realm. So I do teach a lot of just fundamental aspects of spirituality, of consciousness. So I talk about law of attraction, some of the sort of building blocks of energy, how energy works, reality creation, how we are the creators of our reality. I speak about all of those things and help people understand that they are made of energy. We're in an energetic universe, and just kind of how reality creation happens and how people achieve their outcomes or how they're manifesting their outcomes, whether they're
All right.
negative or positive. Yeah.
Right. And I'm curious how you came to this work. Like, I think like most of us that are in this work, we've got our story, and a lot of us are the wounded healers who are gathering our wisdom from the medicine we needed for ourselves. And I'm curious how that shows up for you.
No, that's absolutely how it played out for me. I do have a corporate background. I was in corporate work for about 20 years, and just kind of running parallel with that, I was having a spiritual awakening. And then I realized that I had spiritual interests, like outside of my awakening with helping other people. I had some spiritual gifts that were popping up, and it just kind of unfolded from there. And both of those tracks kind of ran in parallel until eventually my corporate work just kind of phased out about 3 years ago. And I became so different as a person that I just no longer resonated with that sort of work anymore. And I wanted to do more meaningful work and really help people. And it turns out that the work that I do in the spiritual realm is far better than anything that I ever did in corporate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And just to touching on your point of the wounded healer, I definitely, like a lot of us, they're doing this kind of work had, came from more of a difficult background and childhood and came with my own wounds, and yes, I had to find the medicine for myself, and then that's what I share with other people. And a lot of the coaching that I do is through lived experiences.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that you had a spiritual awakening, and I wonder what you could share about that, because I imagine that some of our listeners may be wondering, like, what does it mean to have a spiritual awakening? What does that look like? What are the aspects of it?
Right, just having such a deep awakening to an understanding of who I am in the world and the fact that I'm a soul and not so much a human. Like I think we're taught that we're human beings with a soul, but we're really souls that are having a human experience. So it just kind of started coming into my awareness, these kinds of thoughts and concepts, and just really understanding and looking at the world in a different way. And then, of course, the spiritual awakening it's a series of awakenings, and basically a dismantling of who we thought we were, and finding out that we're not really that person deep down.
Hmm. Yeah, I can still relate to that. I remember having that moment of I worked in corporate as well for many years, managing restaurants, and there was the day that I walked up to work and I was like, I can't do this anymore. And then it was this slow stepping out of that work, and my roles shifted, and eventually I stepped away, and full time I was doing this, but it was a big transition for sure. And having to create everything for yourself and being an entrepreneur and trying to hold all those hats. Like, it's one thing to show up for a paycheck. It's another thing to create this practice of supporting others and learning all that you learn just through that experience.
Right. I think I was a little bit somewhat stubborn too,
Mm,
because there's a lot of us, we survive in kind of the survival mode state where society teaches us that, we need to work to make money, and that money is kind of the driver of everything that in our life. And I try to hang on to security, this corporate work, and then doing my spiritual work on the side. And I realized that I was existing in two different realities all the
mhm,
time. And I was never really focused on one of those realities. So one of those realities just kind of faded away because it was kind of a bit of a barrier to me moving forward and to fully awakening as a person, and then being able to help other people.
mhm. And would you agree that, like, along the way, like, I'm kind of projecting my own story here, but along the way, I really had a lot of like moments of having these like trials and tribulations around finances, and having to learn through those experiences. But it was always about somehow choosing either balance. Sometimes it was humility of like, oh no, it is right for me to have a part-time job, which is my truth right now, and that job serves me in some way. But there was a lot of resistance, like trying to find that balance. So would you relate to having like all of these experiences that were teaching you something all along the way of that stepping away from corporate work?
Absolutely. I had a lot of just like around lack and scarcity. I think that was part of my childhood. I had parents that were constantly reinforcing, shortage of money, shortage consciousness. So I had to really learn to let go of that. And I'm going to say that's not an overnight thing. And that's something that I'm still struggling with, or still finding balance with some days. But I do see that as an opportunity, as a lesson in life, to learn how to shift my mindset to more of an abundant, to abundance versus lack and scarcity, and
Hmm.
also just learning to let go. Right. And I'm still learning that every day, how to fully let go and surrender to this new path. And because it's unfolding the way it needs to. It's not necessarily unfolding the way I would like it to. And then trying to let go of this need for security, or this need to always know where my next paycheck is coming from, or, having that guaranteed security, because on this
Hmm.
journey, and especially if you're working in the spiritual realm, you have to let go of
Hmm.
that constant need to feel secure.
Yeah. And often those corporate jobs, like even the not corporate jobs, whether we're hanging on to the stability of a paycheck or security that comes from those jobs, but there's also a loss of something. And that was the biggest thing that I felt, was just this like loss of my autonomy. Because at the end of the day, I always felt like if I was depositing the paycheck, I was agreeing to everything that I was being asked to do on a certain level. And that's hard. Actually, it was funny. I worked at Starbucks, and they actually let me bring in some of my teaching and coaching, and in a small way. And I always thought that was so surprising, because I didn't think that that was going to be welcome. But my particular direct manager was open to that kind of thing. And I used to bring it into our district meetings. And I was lucky though. I think that's the exception rather than the rule.
Yeah, that is, I would agree with that. That is pretty rare, but I'm going to say that's something that you probably attracted,
Mm,
as part of your journey, and well done with that.
hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious about the spirituality piece. I used to work in a treatment center, and clients really had a lot of struggle with this concept of understanding the difference between religion and spirituality, and where those things intersect, and how to release some of the past experiences around spirituality. So there was actually this module that we would teach, and I loved teaching it because I loved having that conversation with people about what is spirituality? How does it show up in our everyday life? And I'm curious about your perspective around that conversation because I imagine it's part of what you offer for folks as well.
Right. So just spirituality in everyday life kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Or how to reconcile that religion versus spirituality question.
Right. Well, I've never been a religious person. I guess I think of spirituality as more broader. I think religious is a bit more specific, maybe to
Hmm.
certain ideologies. I think, there is a place of spirituality in religion, but I think that the spirituality is like its source, it's all that is. So it's not specific, it encompasses everything. It's a broader thing. That's how I would compare the two. I'm not from a background at all of somebody who did attend church. It was not part of
Hmm.
my upbringing at all. But I think just every day, there's a lot of people that aren't necessarily full blown spiritual or in a spiritual awakening, but they still can be somewhat spiritual in their day, right? So focusing on gratitude and positivity and really understanding that if you have negative thoughts, you're probably going to have a negative experience.
Hmm.
I think these are some of the universal sort of spiritual concepts that a lot of people dabble with, let's say.
Hmm.
But I think that you can bring spirituality into everyday life in pretty easy ways that will improve your
Hmm.
life quite a bit.
Sure. And what are some of those ways?
So just being very aware of your emotions, being very
Mm.
aware that you're like we are creators of our reality. So there are universal laws. One of them is the law of attraction, and that is we receive what we put out. And
Hmm.
just understanding that you can shift that, you can shift your thoughts from negative to positive. You can focus on what you want instead of what you don't want. Because literally you're like an artist with a canvas and a brush and you're
Hmm.
creating your experience. So just I think just understanding that can help people shift in positive ways where they can start it
Hmm.
living the life that they want to experience versus
Yeah.
not.
And I imagine the voice that I used to have, which is like, well, all of this stuff is happening in my everyday life, the struggle, the suffering, the interpersonal conflicts, like I didn't create that. So you're telling me to think positively, but all this stuff is happening around me externally. So how am I supposed to, change the direction of this boat that is my life?
Right. That is something that I encounter a lot with people in general and especially clients. And like a lot of stuff is soul level too. We came to this earth plane with different themes that we want to explore. There's your soul has a plan already for your life. And a lot of the things that some of the adversity you face or struggles are actually things that your soul lined up. It's not something we called in as people or as humans. So I try to educate people around that. You're not asking for these things to happen. You're not actually doing anything to cause them. But from a higher perspective, on a soul level, these are things that we did choose to experience for
Hmm.
various reasons.
And so that comes back to the piece you said about being a soul having a human experience, which I think I first heard that when Wayne Dyer, I think, used to say that, and others. And so what is that perspective? Why would we choose I've had moments in my life where it's like, why did I choose this? Like it seems ridiculous, but it's so hard. Why would I have said yes to this? I just want to have joy. I just want to have freedom. I just want to have all of this flow.
Well, I think even adversity that we face can actually lead to us having an improved experience and that's another difficult one for people to wrap their heads around because through adversity, we really find out who we are. We strengthen as a person. We let go of a lot of things about ourselves that we don't like. Like, a lot of people struggle with people pleasing and things like that. And I think a lot of those kinds of characteristics that we're not fond of can actually be improved upon through going through different experiences. So even a very adverse experience. And I think a lot of adverse experiences are just things that happen in our life are actually a redirection to something that is better for us.
Hmm.
So as difficult as it is for things to fall apart, then it just redirects us to a path where we're meant to be and a path we're meant to walk.
Yeah. And the acceptance of that or the awareness of that can be hard to accept in a lot of ways. I think about the terrible things that people have to go through in this lifetime. And ultimately, I think we get to a place of acceptance eventually, but we might not see it at the time. I know that in my own life, there's things that have happened to me that I'm grateful for because if it wasn't for those moments, I wouldn't have gone on the trajectory I was. But in that moment, I never would have said that. And I certainly wouldn't want to have heard that. And that's the human part, right? It's like that human part is really not wanting to go through what we're going through. And, you talk about people pleasing, and I think there's an emotional aspect as well. Often I'm realizing that we don't want to be with the emotion that's coming up, the feeling, the story that comes along with it. And it's really hard. And then we're just avoiding that in all sorts of ways.
Yes, this is something I do encounter quite often. It's difficult for people to go there, like to even face their story, like you said, to dig deep into their wounds. And a lot of people feel because it's something that happened to them, it's like, I shouldn't have to go through this, or, this happened to me and I shouldn't have to relive this. And I think that we do have to essentially relive our experiences in order to transcend them. And there's no
Hmm.
shame in that. There's no shame in what's happened on our journey. And there are really truly no mistakes on the journey either. It's just opportunities to learn and opportunities to
Hmm.
understand ourselves more. So I try to basically what I do is I don't take on the responsibility of my clients' journeys. I basically open the door for them to walk through, like a door of transformation. And I support them on their journey and I help them understand that nothing has gone wrong, but now they have an opportunity to turn things around maybe in a more positive way. And then, like why spend the rest of your life feeling the way you do when you can shift and change and you can start living the life that you deserve?
And in your bio, you mentioned becoming who you truly are. So how does that show up? What does that mean? And how does that show up for people?
Right. So it's just a series of like stripping away things and shedding things that aren't you, things that you've been carrying. So, we have a lot of conditioning as people through our childhoods and our life. There's like programming, right? Just we have belief systems that aren't even ours. We become our experiences. If we have traumatic experiences or negative experiences, we hang on to that energy and we essentially become those. We become that energy. And we have a lot of misconceptions about who we are as people, and there's a lot like a lack of self-love with a lot of people. So I basically just help people strip away, and I do it in a very authentic way that resonates with them. Strip away all of the things that aren't theirs.
Hmm.
Let's look at your belief systems about yourself. How do you feel about yourself? Just piece by piece, just strip that away. And then I actually work with them on an energetic level too. I'm a Reiki master and an energy healer. So I bring energy medicine into the experience. And then I provide them with opportunities to release trauma and release the energy that's maybe weighing them down. And then that just gets everything moving. And then at that point, you can start bringing in new belief systems and new
Hmm.
thoughts, new ideas. So it's
Yeah.
it's an extensive process.
And I think you bring up an interesting and important facet of this work, which is that discovering that a lot of this is about the body, not the mind. This balance of talking things out and using talk therapy in whatever way that shows up, and then balancing it with the energy work to support the body and release these things. It's a pretty big shift for people because I think we're learning, or at least I'm learning and witnessing that most of it comes back to the body, that we're storing these things like a filing cabinet in our body, and we need help to complete certain patterns and release them. So I love that you're mentioning that because it both are helpful and supportive in shifting those patterns.
Absolutely. It is largely the body because your body never forgets anything that happened to you, right? We're made of cells. We have something called cellular memory, and a lot of that trauma and just dense energy just gets stored in the body. And then that energy is what's flowing through us, and it can actually trick us, right? I think it's like seeing through a veil when you have a lot of trauma. You're looking at everything through your trauma. So that's all stored in the body. And then, I do some work on the mind as well, because our belief systems will trick us too, right? And a lot of belief systems aren't our own. And also, just the way we think can actually create more trauma in our lives as well, which adds more density to the body.
It does. And that brings up an interesting piece around, like, I guess it comes back to the resistance that we can bring up, because again, we're having this human experience. We want certain things in our everyday. And I notice a lot of people are so focused outward, and healing happens by focusing inward. So how do you navigate that with people? Like, obviously when people come to the work with someone like you or I, it's like they want to do this work. They're ready for whatever reason. But there can still be resistance for all sorts of reasons.
Well, absolutely. Resistance is something that's very common, and I try to help my clients overcome that, not through force, just by guiding them in a way that they understand that they have that resistance. There's something beyond the resistance if they can just learn to let that resistance go. But that is like a large part of the work that I do, is just bringing those walls of resistance down, because they're built so high and they're so strong in a lot of people, and they could really want healing, but just not, for whatever reason, they're resistant to the process, because, as
Hmm.
to your point, they have to go there. They have to relive things. They have to go there. They have to be accountable and responsible on this journey as well if they want real change.
Hmm. And so let's take a little bit of a left turn here and focus in a little bit on astrology, because I think about the times we're in and everything that is shifting and changing, and the movie that we're witnessing and the way it's playing out, and how difficult it is for people to kind of accept that, there's things around us that are crumbling, and ways of being and ways of living in the world that might not come back, and all of that. So how does the astrology support all of which we're going through at this time?
Well, astrology is actually very relevant and very powerful, and each of us has our own astrology, of course, and it is very telling as to who we are as people. So I do emphasize that quite a bit with my clients. And once we start digging into the astrology, you can see it's a soul's blueprint, as much as like your soul coming here with a plan. The astrology is also supporting that. And it's very relevant as to who you are as a person and what you will experience in this life. So I do spend a lot of time helping people understand their astrology, just as an awareness as well, as part of the overall thing
Hmm.
that I do. Yeah.
Yeah. And building upon that, how does that show up on the larger perspective, from an astrological perspective of what we're witnessing right now?
You mean just like with the energies of the moment, the things that
Yeah,
are
the
going on
collective. Yeah.
in the collective? So there are a lot of huge, big astrological shifts happening right now, collectively and individually, and some of them are unprecedented. We've never seen these shifts before, these planetary shifts. We had a very rare, like, Aries stellium. I'm not sure if you follow astrology, but we had an Aries stellium recently, where it was like 8 planets lined up in Aries, which has never happened before in our existence. So we are seeing these big shifts that are epic and that are never before seen. So
Hmm.
it is affecting people quite powerfully, and as well, not just astrology, but also, I'm not sure if you follow the Schumann resonance as well. The solar activity on the planet as well is also impacting people very profoundly as well.
Hmm. And do you think that these energies are pushing people to self-reflect and do that internal work that is being asked?
Absolutely, I think that especially the solar activity that's happening on the planet, it's kind of like a built-in mechanism to evolve humanity, even people that aren't spiritually awakening. And I know for a fact that the solar energy interacts with the energy in your body, and it pushes it to the surface. So people are going to be forced to self-reflect, because that energy will come to the surface. And that trauma, or the whatever the energy is that you're carrying, needs to be cleared. And that will bring about a lot of self-reflection, soul searching,
Hmm.
new feelings, new emotions.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then obviously all the astrological shifts are equally as powerful too.
And so can you break that down a little bit more? Because I'm what I'm hearing is that we have an energetic mismatch, I guess. Like, so as these these solar energies come in that are maybe more loving, more pure, whatever that looks like. Maybe you could just go into that.
I think they're actually very complementary and I think they're very similar. I think that astrology points to a series of shifts that will just naturally happen at different times in divine timing. And I think that the Schumann resonance or better said, so the Schumann resonance is just a way of measuring the solar energy that's coming from the sun and hitting the earth. That energy in itself is doing very similar things, just slightly different because the astrology is more specific to your soul's blueprint, whereas the solar energy is really just pushing energy to the surface. It's basically causing people to ascend rapidly. And I think they're complementary and similar, but I think they can both be very confronting and very abrupt and also very uncomfortable for people. I've never really heard anybody say that the solar energy is loving. I guess it's loving from a higher perspective because everything is love, but I think most people receive it and experience it as quite daunting and it's, exhausting and you feel quite discombobulated because essentially it's causing your vibrational frequency to elevate very quickly. And then there's a gap between your current state where you're at and this new frequency that's attempting to enter into your energy field. So there's like a bit of a, push pull,
Mm-hmm.
energetically speaking. So it can be
Yeah.
very, but very
Okay.
good.
And I think I just learned something because I always thought the Schumann resonance was like a measurement of our vibration, the Earth's vibration, not how you described it. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. I mean, you're not wrong. It is because the earth, and I don't know the exact frequency of the earth. It's like 7.83 or something like that. But so
Mm-hmm.
the earth has a frequency and the energy that's hitting the earth is much higher frequency. So those two energies are interacting with each other. So it
Okay.
is naturally raising the frequency of the planet itself, but then all the
Okay.
things that are on the planet, so everything is energy.
Okay. And you mentioned ascension in what you were saying. So to someone who's never heard that word ascension, what is that about?
So that's essentially is so well. So there's the spiritual awakening, and that's like an event or a series of events where we elevate in frequency, and then things shed old parts of ourselves, and the goal is for us to become who we really are. But ascension is it's the elevation of it's the expansion of your consciousness. It's the elevation of your frequency to much higher levels, so that you're I'm sure you've heard of like the earth is the third dimension of reality. There's like higher realms, the fourth dimension, the fifth dimension, and up. So ascension is kind of associated with the fifth dimension, which is a complete rising up out of the third dimensional reality, right? Which people call the matrix. So it's just a complete elevation of consciousness to a much higher level so that you no longer fit within that. Like people that ascend to like the fifth dimension of reality no longer feel that they fit in with the third dimension because it's a completely separate thing, different thing.
Mhm. And so on that end, there may be people who are experiencing this reality from that fifth dimensional energy, even though it's predominantly that third dimensional energy. And so it's like there's two realities living out at the same time and more, of course, because we all are having our unique experience, even though it's funny. We recently were this other group that I'm a part of. We were watching this video called the Existential Crisis Iceberg. And one of the existential crises in this iceberg was that we're all having our unique experience and that we have no understanding of what that other person's experience is. So it's like we're all having our unique journey play out. And when I think about what you're saying about this being the matrix, it's kind of comical because I know, like, I'm involved in human design, and when you go down these rabbit holes, you are confronted with that question of like, what is this? Like, are we just part of a big video game? Like, what is really playing out because of all these patterns we see? So it's really interesting to consider those things. Like, is this just a big game that we're in? And we even see that in our media, some of the media that we consume.
Absolutely. And I've actually said the same thing that this is really it's a simulation, right? And
Mm,
it depends on how far down that rabbit hole you want to go, and it comes down to your own belief systems, right? Because we are the
mhm.
creators of our reality. But I believe that there's, billions of parallel universes and timelines, and it's all based on frequency, and that we can shift in between those timelines, and we are billions of times per second, and we can shift very quickly from through these dimensions that people talk about.
Yeah. And how do you help someone reconcile that?
That's why I'm a coach as well as a healer and an intuitive. I
Hmm.
enjoy coaching. It's something that I did in my corporate background that I brought with me, but so the education piece and the awareness piece is just as important as any of the work that I do. And I find that clients make the most breakthroughs actually through the coaching versus
Hmm.
the other parts of the work that I do. So it's just really helping people understand the way things work differently. And of course, like to your point, it's a unique experience. So there isn't really one way of working, but helping people understand as far as their own life and their own reality.
Hmm.
Yeah. Helping them think differently. Yeah.
And in terms of the work that you do, like, do you have a particular niche in terms of who you work with and who comes to you?
Yes. I'm glad you mentioned that because of the work I do is fairly advanced, I do seem to attract a lot of people that are they're not really newly awakened. It's people that are either a light worker or a healer. I tend to work with people that have spiritual gifts, people that are already fairly spiritually advanced. So they understand a lot of the concepts already. And right from the very beginning, I seem to have attracted those sorts of people to work with. And that's not to say that I don't work with people from all walks of life, because the kind of modalities that I offer, they're quite powerful at times. And sometimes that's just what somebody needs, whether they're on this in working in this realm at all. It's just something
Hmm.
that can assist them with where they're
Yeah. And so one of the unique things that you and I each discovered when we met was that we both lived in Vernon for a time, and we both ended up on the island, and we both kind of followed that nudge from spirit to get here. And so I guess my question is, like, what would you say about that for people? Because I feel like, we are guided, and we didn't cross paths knowingly in Vernon, and yet we probably sat in the same circles, and I just don't remember. And I think we actually lived very close to each other. I
at.
think maybe we figured like a couple blocks away. But it's interesting to reflect on those kind of things where spirit guides us, where we're nudged to go. What would you say about that for folks listening to the podcast?
I think that there's always a conversation with spirit. I think we're always being guided and nudged. I think that maybe a lot of people just aren't attuned or just in tune with
Mm,
their higher self, or they're just not understanding these nudges. Or that's where the resistance comes in. Like, I feel this nudge to go somewhere, but I can't do that because of these
hmm
set of reasons. But myself, I've always felt that guide. I've lived in multiple cities, and I always felt that guide to go to the next city at the exact right moment. And I felt very strongly that I was going to leave Vernon. I just had no clue where. So I was sort of the last year or so just waiting for that guidance to come to say where I would actually go. And then in my case, spirit, the universe used a person as a catalyst to attract me to the next location that I just naturally needed to be in.
And what would you like to say about the intuitive aspects of your work?
Well, I do something that I call intuitive storytelling. So I do use tarot cards and oracle cards because they represent energy. I just use them as tools. But essentially, I'm a channel. I'm channeling messages as I'm doing a reading for somebody. So I use the cards as a guide, and then the rest of the information just comes through. And that's why I call it intuitive storytelling, because your energy basically tells a story. So when I pull cards for people, and we will do a large spread, and sometimes I have people actually pull their own cards so that their energy is in the card, and then a story emerges. And then we go through the story, and it's like an energy reading. The cards will reflect the energy that the person embodies, and the energy of their journey, and the energy of them on a soul level will come through. And so it goes very deep. It talks about people's spiritual journeys, the lessons they're learning, like their soul's journey. It talks about different behavior patterns that they have, different thought patterns that maybe aren't working for them. So it goes really deep into what's going on with a person, and it gives them the path to where they want to go. And then it also gives them the context of why they've experienced what they've experienced. Because a lot of people think that they've experienced things unfairly, or, things happen to them that, these adverse situations. So it's just bringing awareness and saying, okay, this is why this happened. These are the themes you're exploring as a soul. These are all the people around you. It can get very deep and very specific depending on the direction that we go with the cards and the questions that they're asking.
I love that. And you mentioned channeling. What would you say to someone who doesn't know what channeling is?
Right. It's essentially being a conduit. So I am an open channel, and so I connect with the universe, various beings. I work with angels, archangels, and spirit guides. I work with people's ancestors. And I go into a channeled state, whether I'm doing energy healing or intuitive work. And then the messages just come through as the information comes through. It's almost like somebody is speaking through me. It's almost like it's not me. I'll just talk for, 10 minutes about something, and then I'm like, wow, that didn't even sound like me, but that's the intelligence speaking through me as the conduit.
hmm And there's different types of channeling. So different people can have different experiences of channeling, but it might not look the same as yours. What would you say about that?
Yeah, there are many different types of channeling. Some people channel, like I do different types of channeling myself. When I'm healing people, I'm essentially allowing high frequencies to come through me. And then, the people receive those in their energy field. And then I receive actual messages. I don't hear like somebody's voice in my ear. I get an idea, or just information comes through, or more context about what's going on. And then there's other forms of channeling as well, full immersion channeling, where the universe will speak through people. And yeah, and then everybody's version of channeling is going to be unique as well because of who they are as a soul.
hmm
Yeah.
And when you think about this ascension and the end of that ascension, like what are we all waking up to uniquely? Because I do believe that we're waking up to something unique. How do you make sense of what that might look like? Because often I find it's not necessarily about what we're doing. It's more about what we're being or how we're being in the world.
Right. We're essentially waking up to who we really are, right?
hmm
Who we truly are, without all of the resistance, the trauma, the belief systems that we've carried our whole life, with programming, conditioning. With all of that stripped away, we can just truly be who we really are. Then we find our place in the world. Once you realize who you are. So like in my case, I awoke into the fact that I don't belong in the corporate world anymore. I want to help people. So I think once you go through that experience of healing and expanding, you come out the other side as your true self. And then
hmm
you can create a world from there based on that energy.
And what do you imagine the world is going to look like at the end of this process? Like I'm imagining that we're going to be completely different in the way that we interact, the way that we live, the choices we make. And it's hard to even imagine that much change that may or may not happen in this lifetime.
Right. I mean, you can see changes happening already. If you look at the different generations, they're just inherently different. So you can see the level of consciousness on the planet is already shifting. So if we continue along that trajectory, we're going to see more and more expansion. But
hmm
also, it really, like we said, we each have our own unique personal experience, right? So we're all kind of in our own version of our own universe, our own earth, right? Again, depending on what your belief systems are. What you experience is going to be different than what somebody else experiences,
hmm
right? So I don't think there's any one earth or one universe. I think that it's all a personal, like, experience that you're going to have.
hmm And you did mention something that's really identifiable right now in our culture. There's a generation that is like not choosing to do what the generations before them did.
Right.
And they're doing things that bring them joy. They're traveling. I don't know how they're doing it, but they do. And they are quite creative, it seems, and quite entrepreneurial in a way that perhaps older generations were not. So it's really interesting to watch. And then the ripple effects of that, because there's jobs that aren't being filled by those people that would have traditionally been filled by those people. So that is like some really clear evidence based on what you just said.
Right. Yeah. And I think we'll continue to see more and more of that. There are more people awakening all the time. And like with the solar activity and these big shifts astrologically that we've never seen, we're going to experience a reality we've never seen.
Hmm. Is there anything coming astrologically that we might want to anticipate or be aware of?
Well, it really comes down to you as an individual, right? So I'm a Gemini, just as an example, and there's like major shifts happening over the next 5 to 7 years that are affecting people with my astrology. So it really comes down to your own personal birth chart and the big shifts that are happening. But there's massive shifts happening throughout all the planetary alignments, so it's not just specific people.
Hmm. What you said just reminded me of I was on the island for the first time back in 2012. And at that point, we were having lots of shifts spiritually, and there was an anticipation of a big event happening in 2012. And I remember sitting in Woodgrove Mall here in Nanaimo and sitting in the food court looking around, and I really wanted something big to change. I was like really anticipating something happening. And I was looking around going, wow, like nothing has changed. And I was kind of disappointed. It was around Christmas time. And then it hit me. I was like, I've changed. Like my perspective on everything had changed. It was this internal shift. And I was like equally as excited about that as I was disappointed. It was this sort of humbling moment. So I like that you pointed to that. Like it's what's changing inside of us. And that reminds me, we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. And it's sometimes hard to accept that.
Yep, it's absolutely true. If you want your external reality to change, you go inwards, right? Which is
Hmm.
it's difficult for people to understand that they think to change their external reality, involves assertion or forcing things or taking action or, working harder. But it's really it's the internal shifts that are going to change your external reality in the biggest way. But just to your point about astrology, numerology is also very powerful, and you may have heard that 2025 was, they're calling it the snake year. That was a number 9 year, right? So we entered into a new energy starting around February, March of this year, and now we're in something called the fire horse year. So that's something a lot of people don't know as well, because the snake year was really about shedding, and the fire horse year is really about forward movement.
Hmm.
Right. So people may be experiencing a lot of shifts in their life and not really understand why all of a sudden things
Yeah.
are changing and shifting. And
Hmm.
yeah,
And 2026 is a 1 year as opposed to a 9 year. So one is about new beginnings and new energy, right?
that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I really was anticipating and excited about this fire energy because I felt like I was shedding so much in 2025. And that energy for me, and I think for many others, continued into 2026. And I think right into May, I was like, is this ever going to, like, is this fire energy ever going to kick in? And then someone said to me that their acupuncturist shared the story of, it does take time to build a fire. It doesn't happen right away sometimes. And then of course in May, it really did feel like that energy picked up and things started to shift quicker, and the fire started to build and action started to happen, and it was really, I really appreciated the shift because it was like hard to continue doing that shedding, but it was necessary work.
Well, I can see the shed being, it's not, again, it's not going to, it takes time to build a fire. It's not going to, like, you go like immediately the day after the shift and everything's different. It builds gradually, but also it depends on how you define forward movement, because sometimes that is more shedding, right? That's deeper levels of shedding, or all of a sudden you
Hmm.
have a voice, like the energy of that, all of the planetary alignments that were happening around that time were also, the veil was lifting for a lot of people, and a lot of people were starting to have a voice, and they were starting to speak their truth. So
Hmm.
some people might see that as part of the shed process, and then other people might see that as forward movement, because those are actually very connected, right? When you shed, all of a sudden you're going to experience forward movement. So they're very intricately connected as well.
Hmm. Very much so. Yeah. So anything else that you'd like to share in terms of the work you do that we might not have touched on?
Yeah, that would be great. So as mentioned, I am in the Parksville area. I do work with people in other parts of the island as well. because we're experiencing such beautiful weather now, we're in the summer season, I am offering nature sessions. So all of my sessions I'm offering in nature, whether it's at the beach, in a forest, whatever your preferred, in a park, whatever your preferred nature is. And that is also a very healing process because people experience big shifts just being out in Mother Nature. So I am offering healing sessions. I'm offering intuitive astrology sessions in nature as well. And then I'm offering these deep transformational containers that are like 2 or 3 hours where I bring all of my modalities. So I will travel to people's locations on the island, and people can meet up with me here, whether it's just for a quick reading or for like full blown container. And then I also do offer coaching and mentoring for people that are going through this process, this awakening ascension process as well. And then on top of that, I do frequency art. So I'm an artist and I embed frequencies into the art that I create. And the last thing I would like to mention is my partner is also spiritual. He lives in this area, and we have a collaboration that we call Astral Twin. And that is going to be a series of spiritual teachings as well as meditations we hope to eventually start bringing into this area. And for people that are seeking just energy work and maybe they don't want to necessarily work with me one-on-one, I do have a page on Instagram where I offer just frequency transmissions where people can, they're about 1 minute long, and they can just sit and watch one of those videos and shift along with the energies that come through.
Perfect. And I'll make sure that your website and other links are in the show notes so that people can find you.
I think a really big impact that most people can experience is if they become aware of their thoughts, because thoughts do create things, and also become aware of your emotions, because thoughts alone aren't that powerful. It's the emotions that are behind the thoughts. So become very aware of your thought, the emotion behind your thoughts, and then look at what you're experiencing as a result. And if you don't like what you're experiencing, know that you have the power to change your thought. And you also can look at your emotions and address your emotions so that you can have a much better experience.
Thanks for that. I appreciate that perspective. It's a good reminder.
Yeah.
So, Kate, thank you for making the time for this conversation. I really enjoyed all the things we touched on and the places that we went. And we probably could have continued talking. You said something as you were sharing your offerings. I was like, oh, that would have been fun to talk about. But that's okay, because we don't always get to cover everything we want. And I think it's good to leave people wanting more. So thank you for making the time. I appreciate the level of awareness that you have. And you really do come across as being a solid teacher. And I appreciate that. So thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for having me and allowing me to introduce myself into the community and share my services and gifts.
You're very welcome. Thank you for joining us on Sacred Sundays. I hope something in today's offering spoke to your spirit, stirred something true, or simply gave you a moment to breathe. If this conversation resonated, please subscribe, rate, or share. It truly helps this work reach the people who are meant to find it. If you'd like to step inside my world a little further, I host a free live practice 3 mornings a week called Start With You. Just 20 minutes on Zoom to return to your own energy. Everything you need can be found at the link in the show notes. Until next time, may your day be slow and sacred.